Okay, so I'm working on my 2008 PT Cruiser here, and we have a rattling noise up here in the front. And I'd been told that this engine mount was making this noise, but I've never, in my experience working on any of these, seen this main engine mount make this type of a rattling noise on these cars. So let me just go ahead and crank it up here and let you see what it sounds like. Okay, so I hope you can hear this. You know, first of all, you know, the engine's not being accelerated or anything, and it's got this constant rattling. And I mean, I suspect that we've got something going on in here in the timing assembly with some of these tensioner bearings or something going out in one of those idlers. So, you know, the previous owner, they had changed out a lot of these engine mounts, and they never got around to the main one, which is, you know, down in the center, that actually holds the engine itself. You got your upper and your lower that keep the engine from twisting their torsion mounts, but you got the one main engine mount that's down in there that you can't really see that is actually holding the engine. But like I said, I've never seen any of those make this type of noise. You know, I don't know, you know, at this point 100% of what's going on, but I would suspect that it's something in here in this timing. I mean, it'll make this noise, kind of a high-pitched rattling type noise, until you kind of get going highway speed, and then it seems to kind of level out and quit making the noise. So anyways, we're going to go ahead and just get started, just like if we were doing you know, a timing belt or anything. We're going to have to get in here and get a lot of things taken off. There's a couple methods as far as, you know, you could use a jack, which is probably what I'm going to do, with some blocks underneath and just jack it up, or you could somehow hook onto it with a hoist and lift this thing up a little bit. And we're just going to lift it up enough that we can get in here and get to things. So let's go ahead and get started on this. Okay, now there's that first mount with that bolt removed, and you can see this thing easily will just kind of move, so you can just move it out of the way. And I'm just getting ready to get up here with my 15. And we're going to move this belt, and I like to utilize a couple of wrenches for leverage, and we'll just maybe going the wrong way. Hold on a second. Okay, so I've got to go in this direction here, and then we'll go ahead and pop that off of there. That's the first belt. Okay, now we're just going to get on this upper mount. We've got an 18 right here, and then we've got two of these 15s that you can see right there, and we're just going to get those loose. And we'll just kind of push this back out of the way for now. Okay, with those bolts out of this upper mount, we can just push it back over out of the way for now, and it should stay enough to get out of our way. We don't want it to get hung up on nothing, but we can't really squeeze it out too easily, I don't think, right now. Well, we may be able to get it out of here. Sometimes they don't want to come out, but that one just came right out. So that's all there is to that. It's a good idea just to put your bolts right back in what it came out of. Now, usually these AC lines are in the way where you can't just pull that out of there, but it actually came out real easy. So now we're just going to go ahead and get down here on our main engine mount. This is going to be a Torx headed 55, and if it hasn't been removed, it'll be really tight. So just, you know, warning you ahead of time. Get you a breaker bar and a cheater bar, and plan on really putting a lot of strength into it and to break that thing loose, because usually it's really tight. So we're going to see how this one's going to go. I'm going to attempt to get it with my impact, but usually it's just too much for it. Okay, this one came out no problem, and that's all there is to that bolt. So just a T55 will get it. And you know, like I said before, make sure that you have your jack under there where you block, because that's all it's holding that engine up at this point. So you want to make sure that you have it supported. So at this point, we're going to work on getting this alternator belt. You can see it's right there, but I found that it's easier to work from the top side on that, because we're going to have to get up in here and get down in there to that tensioner, and you can see the tensioner right there down below that dryer. If we can get it to cooperate here, but anyway, you see that bolt right there that I'm looking at right here? That's the 13 millimeter. I like to use a little ratchet wrench because it's the easiest to get in here. There's not a lot of room, but you just back that off, and we'll go ahead and get that loose. Make sure you got your battery disconnected if you hadn't already. I want to show you also, when I got the jack under here, I've got some more blocks, or at least make sure you got a jack stand. You don't want to rely on that jack, 'cause it could fall. And if you do have to go down, you know, just remove stuff as you need it, but you just want to be safe, because that jack is not reliable and things could happen. So just to show you where I'm at, that bolt that you see backed off right there, that's the tensioner bolt, the 13. Used a ratchet wrench. Come over here, this is the 15. I'm also using a ratchet wrench, and I'm just going to take this loose a little bit, and that'll be good enough. And now we just got to get down to the bottom here, and there's one more. Okay, so right here we've got a 15, and we're going to go ahead and just loosen that off. You can use an extension or get in there with a ratchet, or ever how you want to do it. I'm just going to get an extension and get here, and we just like I said, we just got to get it loose enough to get that belt, so you don't have to get, you know, take it all the way. Okay, well, that bottom bolt here just loosened off. It's enough for me to pull this, enough to just slip it off of here now. Like I said, it didn't take a whole lot on the tensioner there to be able to get it, and we just take that out of our way. Now I think at this point, when we've got it here, we're going to go ahead and work on this, and see, I believe it's going to be a 18, but I'll find out here in a minute. Okay, so this is a 19, but a 3/4 will work as well. And said if you don't have an impact, you're going to have to rent a tool or come up with some means of holding that while you break it loose. So I've got a tool I'll show you here in a minute, but the impact is the easiest way to do it because it's really tight. Okay, it is the longer rod I had to switch over to, so it's working out the best. Usually it's that middle rod that I use on these, but I've got the longer rod, and I'll just be able to take it completely off. And you can see how easily this turns. It's not just terribly tight to pull this off of here, and this will just pop it completely off. There's a keyway on it, you'll see here in a minute, and that'll line it back up, so it's no worries with that. I believe there's a keyway anyways, but if you're having like your seal leaking when you're in here, this is the time to get in here and fix that sort of stuff. Okay, no. There's a keyways on the crank gear itself. Okay, this just goes on, pressed on. That's right. And you can see right there the crank gear for the timing belt. So also, while we're down here, we're going to go ahead and get on these 10 millimeters. We've got 4 of them. There's another one right up in here on this cover. Same thing on this side. We've got one here and one right up here that I probably can't really show you. I can feel it, but can't really show you where it's at. But there's 4 of them. Anyways, take my word for it. On this lower cover, we'll go ahead, since we're right here at it, we'll go ahead and get these off. We got our pulley off, so we'll go ahead and just get that cover off, because we're going to need to get in there and see what's going on. So actually, I'm sorry, 8 millimeter. I just like to use a little tiny ratchet with an 8 millimeter on it. It seems to work the best. So I'm going to get these 4 out, and we'll pop this plastic cover off here. Okay, with those 4 screws out, we're able to just wiggle this cover down. Not much to it. We'll just wiggle on down in there. Now I can tell already I've got excess slack on the belt, and I haven't even took the top part, and this belt has not been changed. Looks like it's got a lot of wear to it from here, but this has got 127,000 miles on it, and you definitely have to change these. Well, they say 80 to 100,000, but I would definitely be looking at a belt change at 100,000. I mean, it's all good until it breaks and you're stranded somewhere, or heaven forbid that it causes an accident. So now for the fun part, we're going to need to jack the engine up. So we got the pulley and everything. There's some other things we're going to have to do up here, and disconnect some things as we need it, so we don't want stuff to get hung up. But that's what we're going to work on here now. Okay, right now I'm just going to work on taking these 4 7 millimeters that's holding this grill, and so we're going to get those out, pop that off there. With those out, you just lift up and kind of be careful the way it snaps in there. Okay, correction, you actually push down a little bit and then pull up. So it's got like a lock right there, you can see how that kind of snaps in there, and it has to be pushed down slightly, and then you kind of lift up. So those are what usually get broken. Usually every car I see, those are broken, so I've always just lifted up. But yeah, that's the little hooks that it has there, and they kind of like snap into place. You have to push down on those, kind of nudge those down, and then pull up and out with that hook. So if that makes sense. But either way, just be careful, don't break your grill. With that out, we're going to go ahead and, let's see, we'll go ahead and mark this with a marker, and we'll get this loose, and then we'll go ahead and work on these 10 millimeters over here. We'll pop all this out, and I just kind of mark stuff with a permanent marker. That way I just get it back into place where it was. And like I said, it's just like a puzzle. I mean, you got to take stuff to be able to get into there, because if you don't, you know, you're just not going to have room. You're going to be fighting with it. You know, even like getting to the high pressure port, which is down there on that pump. So that's your high pressure, that's your low. But down there to hook your gauges, it's very, very difficult. I mean, I just removed this front to get in there. Just, you know, the amount of trouble, you know, and depending on if your arm would even allow you to hook it up in there, would just be so much just easier just to remove some of this stuff. Okay, we got that hood latch off there. Said you can see my marks. I've just kind of marked where I can put it back, and I've just put these are 13 millimeters. Don't lose your washers. It's got a washer that goes in back behind it, so don't lose those. And I've just put them back on there for now. Just going to go ahead and take out this 10 right here, and then I'll remove these 3 and these 3, and you can just see where I've kind of marked it, so I know to put it back in the same spot. And these will just kind of lift up, these little radiator pieces. Just lift that up. With those 6 out, we can just go ahead and lift this up out of the way. I said you could leave the hood latch and just pull it down here, but then it's like scratching up your bumper and in the way. So I just prefer to move it. And you can see that I've got a little wiggle room here now. Now this will also, you can pull this radiator up and out of its grommets and get even a little bit more room. But I think what I'm going to do at this point is go ahead and remove this fan. So I think we're going to do that, and maybe that'll give me the slack without having to, because it's either that or I've got to remove this because it's getting in my way here. So we'll see. Okay, so I didn't remove this or the fan. Actually, I don't like removing the fan because then I go to dinging up my radiator, so I like to keep that on there. But I was able just to get right down through here. I broke them loose, and then I just used a smaller ratchet. They're really no problem to get. And that, just those 3 holding. Now we also got a couple of 15s that are holding this bracket. There's one right here where my finger's pointing that you can't see, and then there's one right here, if you can see that one right down there. Those are 15s, and those are really super tight. So I'm gonna see if I can get those broke loose. Usually I use a ratchet wrench on the lower, and I can usually get like a socket on the upper one there. But that is going to be in my way also. I know, as far as getting this front bracket pulled around and up, but sometimes you know, I can wiggle them up, sometimes I have to wiggle them around. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this bracket just so it's out of my way, because it's more than likely going to be in my way, and it's not a really big deal. I can put it back, but it also allows me to move this power steering pump to get a little more slack and stuff. So that's what I'm going to work on here now, is getting those 2 15 millimeters holding that bracket. Okay, so I use this ratchet to get that top bolt out, and now I just have my wrench on there, you can see, and I'm just going to use this to get that bottom one on that bracket there. It's kind of difficult to see down here, but this is not too bad. and then I'll just be able to remove that completely. Okay, we're going to just pull this bracket out of here. Set that. And so now you can see that that's all loose now, and we also have it loose up here. So I can move that pretty well wherever I need to. Now at this point, we're going to keep an eye on things. We should be able to start getting this jacked up. That front mount likes to sometimes, the little teeth hang on the mount, and you have to take a screwdriver like it's doing right there and just pop it back over there so it doesn't damage your mount any worse. I don't know how that thing looks, but once I get this apart, I'll take it out. I mean, you have to have all of your timing assembly apart to even be able to think about getting to that mount. So, but you know, while you're at it, it only makes sense. It's like another step to just go ahead and take that out and replace it if it hasn't been replaced, because that's the most difficult one to get to. However, like I said, I've seen some that were pretty bad, dry rotted, some of the worst rotted plumbing too, and that yet they weren't rattling. So that's why I just, you know, knew that it wasn't the engine mount causing the problem on this PT Cruiser. Okay, and this is about how far I've got this raised up here, and not done anything special. I've just, we have to get, you can see where we have to get this bolt here where to clear up here, and really the bottom one, the bottom 15 has to clear this, so we have to get it up just high enough to do that. This one here is no problem, but this bottom one here, we got to get it to clear, so you can see about how high that we've lifted it up. And we're just, you know, watching stuff. We're not hitting anything. The radiator's loose, so it can move. It gets in a bind. We got the power steering loose, so you know, that gives you an idea of about how you have to lift it. And so the main thing is just to get those bolts for this out. You know, that's why you got to lift it up. Once you get those out, and then you can like level it, lower it back down a little bit. But done several of these, and hasn't hurt a thing in the world. But you know, other than taking the engine out, you don't have any other options. Okay, you're going to need a cheater bar breaking these loose. I'm using this little ratchet, but I'm just using a wrench and putting on here to get leverage. When you go to breaking those loose, they're really, really tight. So you're going to need to use, now this is the bottom one I'm getting. Like I said, just knead it up enough to be able to get to that. Now, I'll have to get over here and get this one now, but I have to switch to a shorter socket. But you know, you're going to need a lot of leverage. They're really, really tight. But I've got this one and this one loose, and I've just got to get the back one broke loose. Okay, I've got these 15s loose. I just want to show you that they will come out of there. And the hardest one to clear is this bottom one. And like I said, you need it up just enough to be able to get that out of there. Okay, and you can see that's completely loose. So it looks like there's a problem with this tensioner here, because that's loose, and I can spin. I can already tell there's some kind of problem with that. So it was probably just the tensioner that failed. Okay, so now what I'm going to have to do, there's like a secret way of getting this out, and you just have to flip it and flop it. And said this power steering is in the way, so I'm going to have to get both hands, and I'm going to have to move it over a little bit, but you can kind of see you've got room to get it out of there, but it's not a lot, so you have to wiggle it and work it until you can get it out of there. So I'm going to free up my other hand. I'm going to try to move this power steering pump back out of the way and see what I can do. And then as far as this up here, we've got an 8mm that's on the back side, back where my finger's pointing. Can't hardly see. You got one here, and then we got one right here, and that's all there is to that. So we're going to work on getting this out of the way first, because this is the biggest obstacle, and then we'll work on that. Okay, so this did come out like this. I simply have my power steering pump just laying right there. I pushed these coolant, or these Freon hoses, kind of underneath here a little bit more, and essentially I took the bracket, pulled it out a little bit, pushed it in on this right side, and while I was pulling out on the left side, and simultaneously just was able to bring it right straight up through here. Like I said, all the time it kind of depends on these Freon hoses. Some cars are just slightly different, and if there's not room to get by those, then you have to wind up taking more stuff over here and bringing it around, because I've run into that, because you don't want to damage your hoses. But these were able to push up under here to give me just a little bit of room that I needed. So I've got that. I can tell that there's a problem here. I mean, I've got slack. I can tell that the belt is severely worn to the point where it doesn't have a lot of life left. It's going to break. Something is going on with this tensioner, or the bearings, or something there. So I'm just going to go ahead and just remove this belt. I'll unloosen this and just go ahead and remove that belt and take those. These are going to have to be replaced. Like I said, when you get a timing kit, you'll just replace the belt, you'll replace these, and usually the water pump. I don't think I'm going to do the water pump at this point. So a lot of times, if you don't get an OEM water pump, they don't seem to do as good anyways. Might regret it later, but I'm going to just be replacing, I think, everything else, and you know, if it comes up, I'll deal with the water pump later on. I'm going to definitely be checking out the cam seals and the crank seal down there. Like I said, right now is the time to replace that crank seal down there if it needs it, and I'm going to be inspecting that. But now I'm just going to loosen this 13. We'll go ahead and loosen this and get this belt completely off, and we'll take a closer look at this. Like I said, this is not making contact like it should until it doesn't have tension. So we'll see what's going on with it here. Okay, here is the belt that I took off, and you can just tell if it looks like that it's not going to be long before it breaks. Now, even if you buy one of these cars, or any car that's got a timing belt, and they tell you that it's been changed, they may not be telling you the truth. It might be better to check, or they may not even know what you're talking about. But this is the one that came off of it. This is one that I've got laying around. It's not new, but it's a really good one, but I wouldn't use it just because it's been sitting around. Said these things age like any other rubber. But what I want to do, here is the tensioner I took off. I said you get a little 1/4 inch drive ratchet, and you can move this with it loosened. But I was expecting this to sound bad, and the bearings in this actually sound okay. So what I want to do is I want to put it back on there with a better belt and readjust everything, and I'm just going to run it and see how it sounds. Now it could be that this, because it wasn't tensioned properly, but the belt was all, you know, in bad shape too, so it could have been a combination of that. But I want to isolate what this noise is, and it just kind of raises more questions, because this bearing sounds fine. So what I expected to be making the noise wasn't making the noise, unless it's the water pump, which I've not heard any of those make that kind of noise, but I guess it's a possibility. So I may have to wind up replacing that whether I want to or not. I mean, it seems to be fine, but something's making racket, and I need to figure out what is. So I'm just going to kind of isolate it by hooking up this timing, and we'll hook some stuff back up enough to just get it running, you know, put our intake and stuff back on, and enough to get it running to where we can just listen to it. So that's going to be my next step. We'll just put that tensioner back on and throw this better belt on there, and we'll run it and see if it makes any noise. If it doesn't make any noise with that, then I'll probably just, you know, put a new timing belt on there and get it back together and see what's going on. And it could be, I mean, it sounded like it was coming from this timing assembly, so, you know, I don't know at this point really what, unless it, you know, the alternator, but it's got to be something. You know, it's either going to be, maybe even be the power steering. Nothing seems to be, you know, out of the ordinary, but something is definitely making noise. So if I can rule out the timing, then we'll just put that back together, and then we'll hook everything else back up and see what's going on. But irregardless, you know, it's just a matter of time. Sometimes you can get by for a while with these belts, but like I said, the tension was not set when I got in there. This belt is very cracked and dry rotted, so it's just a matter of time. So anyways, I'll follow up once I get this put back together. Okay, because my tensioner and everything appeared fine, I put it back on here with the newer belt, and I've cranked it up and there's no noise. So I just went ahead, I had to tighten this to 250 inch-pounds, and so I've just realigned my marks and got the belt on there. At this point, all I'm going to do is put everything kind of back together, and I'm going to reconnect my power steering and stuff and see if I still have any noise. So the only thing is the belt was loose, the tensioner was loose, so there could have been a problem. It could be defective, and that may be the only problem. So I'm going to be replacing it with some new parts, but just want to rule out. So I'm going to put everything back together and just see if I've got any noise coming from anything else. But when I run it for a little bit there with the belt, no noise whatsoever. So I'm just going to get the other components back on and put it back together for the most part, without putting all the mounts on. And then I'm going to run it again and see if I have any noise, and if I don't, then I'm, you know, pretty much 100% sure that that tensioner was the problem. I said, don't know why it was loose. It could be defective, whatever. It's going to be replaced anyway, but I do have it, the tension proper on there, and I've got it tightened to 250 inch-pounds. It's one of the more difficult things is you got to get a mirror down there to line up the little slot with the spring. The way I used to do these, I would just kind of go by feel. I mean, if you got like no more than like a 45 flexion in that belt, you know, it's usually pretty dang close. So that's one way if you don't feel like fooling with it and can't get a good accurate look at it. But anyways, I'll follow up. Alright, so I've hooked all my components back up and I've ran the car, and I've gotten everything for the most part back together at this point, even the mounts. And I've ran the car and there's not any noise, so I do know that the issue is solved by the fixing the tensioner. Like I said, I've got the one that was in there. I just readjusted it because it wasn't adjusted right, and the belt was loose, so that was causing all the noise. So if you have a similar problem and a noise like this, then you want to, you know, look there. And I have usually I've had a situation like this in the past, and it turned out that the bearings were bad in the tensioner. And it's usually that component that fails more than the idler. But those bearings will go bad and it starts making racket in there. But you can kind of, you know, I was almost 100% sure that that's where the noise was coming from, but I wanted to make absolutely sure because it was really weird that it was making that kind of racket just with the tensioner being and the belt being a little loose. But I put the better belt on there and I put everything together. No noise whatsoever. I'll crank it here in a second. I didn't cover everything. I didn't want to bore you with all that, but I've got another video that I could refer you to that's strictly on the PT Cruiser, the timing, where I went through and I covered, you know, everything from lining it up to doing all the components and stuff. So if you want to check that video out, it can show you exactly how to, you know, go in here and do this. But I'm going to go ahead and crank this up and let you listen to it. Okay, so here it is running. I went ahead, I'm going to order the new, get a brand new set and everything and put on here, but you know, you can't hear that noise anymore. You remember what it sounded like before. So just that little tensioner was causing all that racket. And I mean, that's how you have to rule stuff out. You just got to, you know, go through one thing at a time to figure out where the noise is coming from sometimes. But anyways, said if you got a similar situation, you know, I'm betting that that's what, you know, you got going on if you got rattles. Now, when I was in here, I checked that main engine mount that I was talking about at the first of the video, and I could tell just by looking at it and feeling of it, it was perfectly fine, so I'm not even going to mess with that. We're just going to get a new belt and some new tensioners and stuff on here. So, like I said, I hope this has been helpful. Like I said, I'll refer you to my other video if you want to go through and have a step-by-step on the timing. Or there's a lot of other videos on it, but you know, this is just a troubleshooting video on this noise, and I hope it can help somebody else out. And as always, if you find it helpful, give it a like, and I invite you to subscribe, and thank you for watching.